Hi everyone, welcome to today's podcast episode on doing business in the Nordic countries. I have a special guest with me here, Rasmus Andersen, Regional Vice President Nordics in Zscaler, my old colleague as well. Please welcome Rasmus.
Thank you very much, Petri. And of course, I can introduce myself a little bit. I've been working in the tech industry, specifically in networking and security in the Nordics for the last 25 years. And also in Benelux for some part of that time as well, working both with channel sales, direct sales in SMB, mid-size and enterprise market. Right now, as Petri said, I am the Regional Vice President for Zscaler in the Nordics. We are a platform for Zero Trust in especially delivering services to the largest enterprise in the Nordics. My remit are the mega enterprises, so to speak here. So that is the team that I work with and the customers that I work with here in the Nordics.
Great, thanks, Rasmus. So today we are talking about doing business, selling in the Nordics. Are there any differences between countries? Are there kind of differences between Nordics and other parts of the world? And let's dig into the topic. So Rasmus, I mean, initially, what are the key differences and in the sales approach as well, and like sales techniques that are effective in the Nordic countries? Are there any differences between countries?
Certainly they are. There are actually, even though most of both European and American companies, they believe the Nordics is a whole. We are very advanced in technology in the Nordics, generally speaking, but we are also very different in our cultures, in how we interact, how we do business with each other. And also in that sense, even though there are similarities, there are things you need to be mindful of, both when you're leading teams across borders, but also when you're communicating with customers across borders. One thing that is happening is, of course, especially in the global and multinationals, is that we see more and more spread of cultures, which means you have to be used to working with a lot of different world cultures if you are running sales campaigns into these big organizations. Now, I can say that since I'm coming from the tech industry, we have been living with different kinds of sales approaches, sales tactics that used, sales methodologies that have been used over the last many years. In cybersecurity and in software, it has mainly been medtech or medic that's been prevalent over the last many years, which is also quite useful in starting up a market and gaining new opportunities and having methodology, getting young people into your business and kind of run them through how to work even advanced types of sales. I think this is evolving as we speak. Are seeing in my organization an evolution to a more customer-centric sales methodology, and where we are looking over more of a life cycle of a customer as well and how to deal with them. But again, it differs in the different markets because the different markets procure slightly differently. So for instance, in Finland, they have done as a service for the last, 20 odd years. And that's something which is just about to getting into the other markets as we speak, right?
And you could have mentioned solution selling has well, but I guess that's kind of a change to a more holistic approach towards customer or value proposition. So it's kind of you need to really understand what the customer is doing, how they are doing business, and then kind of tailor your own approach and your services. Do you see that? that trend?
Absolutely. We need to be far better in understanding what are the pain points of the customers on a very broad scale, right? And also sell in different business units within the customer and so on. So of course, depending on what kind of solutions that you're having in play. Now, we have a very transformative solution in our book, which means we have to sell to risk advisors, we have to sell to the CFO, even in sometimes into the CEO. We have to sell to M&A people. We have to sell to the CISO, the CIO, and even to the networking team. So we have to sell across and find the different pain points in all the areas and see how we can connect the dots. Not a simple task to do, but that's a thing we need to do, which also means, and I think that's important as well, that we need to look at the route to market. What kind of channel are we working with? What kind of ecosystems do we have around these solutions? Because that becomes immensely important in both the customer success and of course our success as well.
Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, you mentioned partners. I mean, if a company would like to enter the Nordic countries, or let's say a Finnish company would like to enter Denmark, and they are considering the sales model, whether to be, let's acquire direct customers or let's build a channel. So if they are kind of considering to build a channel, what would be your advice on where to start? So are there any kind of best practices, to get going and really build a solid business on building a partner channel?
Yeah, well, yes, I would say so. Again, it all boils down to what it is you're trying to sell, what kind of customers you're trying to serve, and how integral that relationship is going to be. Of course, you can always go to a direct sales motion, but then it's a question of how are you looking at your expense to revenue ratio? How is that going to work? Often works to start a market, but when you start maturing it, you simply cannot get the growth without having your channel with you. Now, having said that, depending on how complex your solution is, of course, you also need to have a very clear picture of how that market landscape is evolving in the individual countries. And again, it differs quite a lot. So if you're working with government, you need to adhere to all the different government procurement, which means you need to have the partners who have those agreements in place. That's not a simple task to get them. One way I would say is to look at what is your target market. What are the events and exhibitions that they are going for? Go visit those events and exhibitions, see which partners are also there, and what kind of solution are they projecting there as well. See how you can fit into that and have an open and honest discussion with these guys. Trust is super, super important in the Nordic countries across the board. Maybe a little bit more prevalent in some countries. Actually, in Denmark, it's super important. And you don't always need to verify everything, but you have to have a very, very open conversation about what is the value you can bring to those partners, because there's a lot of people out there and they are restrained. Right?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I mean, the worst scenario of partner channel building is, and I've seen many of those cases, is that, hey, this is a big company, let's partner with them, and then they end up signing the agreement, but nothing happens. No euros, a lot of frustration. So that's I really know where you're coming from on that one. And I mean, it's about, like you said, go into events and look at what kind of partners surround your end customers. It's like this: what is the ecosystem around your end customers, I many times said to my potential customers that if you understand the kind of the ecosystem around your partners, the next thing is of course a little bit simplified, but the next thing that you should do is to try to create a couple of slides or the value proposition, like type why partner with us, and so
Yes.
how we do business together. What's the revenue. What's the profit. So if you're able to do that, then maybe that segment is kind of for it.
Absolutely. And also have the last little statement, why now?
Yeah. Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, a lot of these partners, especially if you have the larger ones, they have an annual cycle of reviewing their partner base, right? They might take you in because you have a specific solution which addresses a pain point within their customer base. But if you want a more broader, wider, longer-term relationship with them, you need to get a why now. And of course, the other two whys, you need to get that in as well. So you can kind of build on that over time. And I think you also put a little bit of nugget to it. It's super important that you start with a plan, and instead of just starting and then come with a plan. Often what I've seen, and I've done it myself, I'm guilty as charged. You go there, you start something, you have maybe a customer, you go through a project, which is of course the initiator to get stuff started. But whilst you're working through the process of that customer, you also need to build your plan so you have some stuff to keep each other accountable for. Otherwise, I often see that things are just running into the sand. And then again, like you said, Petri, a lot of frustration on both ends, which is completely unnecessary. And in reality, we're here to make money, all of us, and we're here to make happy customers, because that is what's going to be important for us in the future.
Yeah. And now, so about doing business doing deals in the Nordic countries, are there kind of differences in the countries, like regarding negotiations, procurement, this kind of stuff, or is it similar?
There are similarities, right? But also quite big differences, I would say. Of course, again, it depends on segments that you're operating within, and also the culture of doing international business. So, for instance, one of the things in Denmark, we haven't got any raw materials. The only thing we've got is basically our brains, which we are trying to push on the rest of the world. But that also means that we are looking at things slightly different than in other places in the Nordics. I would say one thing that's very prevalent in Denmark is that we are basically we're negotiating everything, right? We are trying all the time to discuss whether or not we can do any haggling on different things, and that's one thing that we are doing. Whereas in Norway, a lot of the time they expect to get the best offer first time. They don't expect that they have to negotiate. They might be doing a little bit, but it's quite little compared to what you see in Denmark. So that's a clear thing. Also in Denmark, we don't have exactly the same type of consensus seeking as you may have in, for instance, Sweden. The buying unit might be smaller in Denmark. One person can say yes and run with it. That will not happen in Sweden. You will have more that you need to get in there.
Okay. Does it also mean that kind of the sales cycle could be a little bit shorter in Denmark compared to Rinne?
That depends on the size of the company, I would say. But I would say, generally speaking, yes. Generally speaking, yes. That would be the case. That would be the case.
Or actually doing business marketing, sales, market engagement with your buyers. I mean, most of the countries speak, or people in all the countries speak very good English. Can you manage with English in all countries, or is it beneficial to try to kind of adapt to a local language?
To a certain level, you can manage with English. But if you want to really break into the countries, you need to have local speaking people. And that is across the board. There is a thing. Now, me personally, I don't speak that many languages. I speak Scandinavian, English, a little bit of German. But if you learn a country's language, you also start to understand their culture. And that's a general thing in Europe. I would say that if you start learning the language, you can understand the culture, and that means that you can get away with a lot more things. If you deal with public sector, and by that is across the board in all other countries, you cannot just do it with English. It's impossible. You need to have local language. The RFPs you will get are in local language. So whatever services you want to get over the table, if you haven't got anybody who can understand local language, you're not going to be able to respond to it. Of course, you can do that by having an ecosystem of partners around you. But if you want to be driving your own success together with your ecosystem, I would suggest that you look into to local language, or having somebody. It could be an agent. It could be some professional that you hire to help you go to market, who can actually help you with the understanding and the culture and translate that into the language that you want. That seems to be an important thing.
So it's not only the language, but kind of you're understanding the local culture and the network. So kind of beneficial to have someone local in your team, whether your own employee or kind of a third party, or sales outsourced sales professional or so forth. Is that okay?
I would say so. Yes, I would say so. Absolutely. That is again, you can. Let's say you're coming from the UK, wanting to sell into the Nordics, which is quite often what happens with American tech companies trying to get into EMEA. You can get to a certain stage, which means you can potentially talk to the, let's say, top 10 largest companies, because most of the people deciding there will be in international environment, and it's fine. But if you want to get to other parts of the society and organizations, then you will start to struggle. So putting part of your plan would likely to be either get a local sales professional that you can sales for hire in some way or form, or you start hiring your own team, which is not uncommon that people do that. But I think what we generally see in the market of professionals is that we have more and more consultants who start to work as consultants because you can. And it's an interesting way for a lot of younger people to get to learn all kinds of different trades. So I think you can get both younger people, but also experienced people like yourself and me to come and help you drive that into the market. I think that's if you want to get success fairly fast, that's what you need.
Yeah, it's interesting. So kind of this is tough question, but kind of if you considering and do a full Monty, let's say, start selling in all four. I mean, there are more than 4 Nordic countries, but let's say Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden. What's kind of for a tech company? What would be the kind of the minimal setup that you should have? Overall and in locally.
So I like the model where you have account executives and then associated technical resources to them, maybe in the 1 to 2 scenario, right? So maybe you have 2 account executives, one system engineers. I believe that's a model that you should go for. Now, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be very tricky for you to go for all 4 countries in one go. That requires a lot of human capital, which is not super easy to do. I would rather do it a little bit staged, looking at where do you have the biggest bang for the buck, and then move from there. Of course, it's always Sweden is seen as the biggest market, but Sweden can also have a little bit of delay. Just referring back to what we discussed before, does it take a little bit of a longer time to get through? They have a little bit of delay. So depending on where you are and is it sustainability solution? Is it a finance tech solution? What is it that you are peddling here? Then looking at which country is the most interesting. And of course, if you have really the new startup, Stockholm is of course important, but I think the area around Helsinki is super important in the gaming industry, also in fintech. The stuff that is happening in Finland is super interesting, and that's a place where you, if you are a tech company, that you probably want to start. And get a lot of findings that you can then roll over the remaining part of the countries. It's more important in some countries to have native speaking than in others. I think in Finland, it can be very important. I think in Norway, it's super important. Norwegians, they tend to like to do business with Norwegians.
That's interesting. Yeah. You also mentioned that when you kind of introduced yourself that you speak Scandinavian language. Of course, Finland is not officially part of Scandinavia. Definitely our language is not Scandinavian, so it's totally different. So
Yes.
basically what it means that you can manage speaking Scandinavian with Swede and Norwegian. So you don't need to use English. Is it so?
I can, but it takes time, right? I use a lot of Swedish words because I've been working in the industry for 20 plus years, right? So that helps me. But it's rather clear for me. If I speak Scandinavian in Stockholm, I need to speak very slow. Some of them will understand, but if you get people who are living north of Stockholm, it will be very tricky for them to understand me. Whereas the southerners from Sweden, they do understand me. Most of them do, at least, because I grew up with Swedish television. They grew up with Danish television, right? The one Swedish television for me, the language they spoke was from Stockholm. So that's why I understand people from Stockholm, and it's fairly simple for me. I also understand Norwegians if I'm in front of them. But if I'm on the phone with for instance, people from Bergen or Stavanger or further north, it's tricky for me as well. And then you can revert to English. The benefit you have from getting a Scandinavian person or a Nordic person is that we understand the differences between the different countries. And therefore, when you can start the conversation with Scandinavian language, then the next step, flipping into English, is less of a problem because you've already built some kind of rapport. And the thing is, even though we are good in English, we are not using super sophisticated words, which sometimes if you get a Brit into to Scandinavia, they're using very sophisticated language. And that can be a little bit, what can I say, intimidating for Nordic people.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So you can kind of break the ice when starting with the Scandinavian language. So it's all about this very, very old saying that in sales you need first to sell yourself as a person, and then you need to sell yourself as a professional. And I mean, starting with the local language is kind of creates rapport.
Yeah, people still do business with people, right? Which is a very, very nice thing, because otherwise we would have an AI engine doing everything for us.
Yeah, let's see what happens in the future. Some
For sure,
interesting
it
reports.
will make some part of our life easier with these AI engines. I appreciate that, and it will also, personally, I use it quite a bit to research customers and get an understanding of their pain points. So I see a lot of benefits in AI, but I also see that I doubt this will take over short term, because there is still a lot of, what can I say, social relationships that needs to happen in any case, in any deal, to make it happen.
I agree. Totally agree. So finally, Rasmus, I mean, you already answered this very much, but if I'm a CEO of a small tech company, let's say a startup with a decent amount of business in the whole market, planning to start selling in other Nordic countries, what would be your kind of advice? I know this is a big question again. You already kind of answered that partly, but where should we start? You mentioned that don't start in all countries, same time. So pick one and start from there. Any other advice you have?
Again, yes, I would. I would build a long-term plan over maybe 3 years, with some different measurements on success. Whatever tools you can use OKRs, you can use KPIs, you can use whatever you like. But I would start building those with some ambitious goals. Now, if you're a small tech company, yes, you may have investors in there, you may have some money, you may have some funding, but you want to be careful about burning it too fast, right? So I think by doing so, by looking at that, it would be interesting to get some kind of professional who have done this before, who can give you advice on the individual cultures, who may actually already have contacts within the partner base, the ecosystems that you want to get to. Because, again, like, people are doing business with people, and this is a shortcut. It may cost you a little bit more on the hourly rate than hiring a person, but that experience is worth its weight in gold. So I think that will expedite your journey. Hiring people is a lengthy process, and you have a risk of failure. I think when you have laid the groundwork with maybe some consultant, maybe some professional who can help you, then you can start looking at, now the expense to revenue is worth it, right? That is probably what I would be doing, going out in the different countries. Money is a scarcity, right? And you have to think about it that way.
It is, and kind of it's really hard for a small company to kind of estimate, what does it cost for us to go international. There are, like you said, various ways of doing that. You can burn a couple of million in 1 year, or you can start accelerating like with few hundred thousand. It's a big difference.
Cool. Of course, it depends on what kind of solution you have, right? If you have a battery that can charge a city on one charging, well, then you don't need anybody, right? You can just put it on App Store and off you go. But it's quite seldom you're in that situation.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, Rasmus, thanks for joining. It was a pleasure hosting you today. And thanks for your insight. This is very useful for lots of companies planning to either enter the Nordic countries or start selling from one country to another country. So really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Petri.